Functions are defined or declared with the function keyword, and here we see the syntax for declaring a function in JavaScript. The declaration begins with the function keyword followed by the name of the function. Function names follow the same rules as variables. They can contain letters, numbers, underscores, dollar signs, and they are frequently written in camel case, right? The name is followed by a set of parentheses, which can be used for optional, and the keyword here is optional, parameters. The code in the function is contained in curly brackets, just like for a statement or an if statement, right? So similarly to a loop statement, if statement, switch statement, our code to be executed goes within our curly brackets. All right, so let us look at a very quick and easy example of a function. So using the function keyword, let us create a function called greet. And this one will have no parameters. And this function will simply console.log. And let's just say, have a great evening. And to invoke this function or call the function, we simply type the name of the function, greet, followed by the parentheses. So if we save this file and let us go back and do a refresh, open up our new file, we see here that our function is called and it executes the code that is within the curly braces. All right, so essentially this is a simple function that does simply print something to the screen. If we wanted to personalize this function by including the name of someone, we can add a parameter called name, and inside our function, let us change our double quotations to backticks. And let us include the name of the person, right? Now, in order to invoke this function, we have to pass in a name value when we call our function. So we can simply pass in a name and let us wrap it in strings, and let us say Sally. And let us save this and do a refresh. And we see here that it is now personalized and it is now greeting the name of the person that is passed in as the argument. So here we have a function that can now be reused to greet anybody that logs into our website. Now, more than one parameter can be used in a function. We can pass multiple values to a function and return a value. So let us now create a function that returns the sum of two values. So let us define our function, and let's call this function add. And this function will have two parameters, x and y. And inside the function body, we are using the return keyword that will return the sum of x and y. Now, when we call or invoke this function, we simply pass in two values to be added. Let us add 12 and 18. And let's comment out our greeting function call and save our file. And then we refresh. Okay, so in this situation, we have to do a console log because this function is returning a value. So it does not have an echo our console log statement. So we could actually console log, or even better, let us save this inside a variable, and then let us console log the variable. So let's save it and refresh, and now we see that we get the value of 30. So now we can reuse this addition function multiple times throughout our code without having to always define x plus y or num1 plus num2. We can also create what is known as a function expression by assigning a function to a variable. So here where I have defined the sum, I could also have included my function. So let me just do a quick cut and paste. So now I have set my sum. Let me remove some of this space. So now what I've done is I've set my sum function or sum variable equal to my addition function. So in order to use this, I will actually have to use the name of the sum function, and I can now pass in two values. So let us say 100 and 210. And keep in mind that we will have to console.log this. All right, so let us save this, and we should still have a function that adds the two numbers for us. So that is known as a function expression, where we can set a function equal to a variable. So now that we have looked at how to define functions using the function keyword, ES6 JavaScript comes with a newer and more concise method of defining a function known as arrow function expressions, right? So these are represented by using an equal sign followed by an arrow, and this is known as a fat arrow notation. And now let's look at an example how we can use this function or this syntax to create a function. So let us define, and let us use the keyword const, and let's just say multiply. And we can now open up our parentheses and pass in x and y. And using our fat arrow notation, we can open our curly braces and say return x multiplied by y. So let me copy this console log. And now we're doing multiply. So let's multiply 100. Let's multiply it by 14. And let us save this and let us run it. And we get the expected output, right? So whatever we decide to multiply this by, whether it's 1, let's multiply it by 2, and we get 28. So this is how we can use arrow functions in ES6 JavaScript. So just so you know, arrow functions are always anonymous functions and also a type of function expression. Now, if we are writing a function and we only need one parameter, then we can exclude the parentheses. So let us take a look. So let us define a function that squares a number. And let's set it equal to x, which is our parameter. So since it's a single parameter, we will not use parentheses. Then we will use our fat arrow notation and simply open up our curly braces and return x multiplied by x. So let's comment this out and let us call our square function. And this takes one parameter, so let us square 12. And let us save and refresh, and we get 144. Now, in an example like this, where our function only consists of a single return statement, our arrow function allows the syntax to be reduced even further. If the function is only a single line return, both the curly brackets and the return statement can be omitted. So we can rewrite this function to look like this. So we have removed both the return statement and our curly braces, and it should work pretty much the same way. So let's refresh and let us do 8 and refresh, and we get 64. All right, so this is even more concise and more neat than it was before. In the case that there are no parameters, just an empty set of parentheses are required with an arrow function. So in our final example, let me comment this out. Let us do const print equals, and we have no parameters, so we'll just have a pair of empty parentheses. And here we can simply print, or not print, let us actually do an alert. And let's just say this is an alert from an anonymous function. And let's just call our function, and let's say print, save it, and let's now run it, and let's now refresh our page, and we get our alert from our anonymous function. So if it's a simple one-liner like this, you can write an anonymous function this way. Else, if it is multiple lines, then you would probably want to include your curly braces like so for multiple lines, and this will run just the same way as it did before. But if you have a one-liner, then this is way more concise and neat. So this is how we can define functions in different ways, anonymous and nameless function expressions in JavaScript.